The Empress's Thread: How Asian Women Engineered the Silk World. Chapter 8: Wild Silk and the Matriarchs of Assam. The Myth of the Singular Road. When we are taught the history of the ancient world, we are usually taught the history of a road. We are told of the Silk Road, that legendary, singular artery of trade spanning from the rigid, imperial courts of Han Dynasty China, across the arid steppes of Central Asia, and straight into the waiting hands of the Roman Empire. We are told that silk was a currency, a state-monopolized secret guarded by patriarchal emperors, woven by women who were bound by strict quotas and confined to indoor workshops. For centuries, the global imagination has been captured by this xenocentric narrative, a story of continuous, unbroken filaments spun by domesticated mulberry silkworms. But history is rarely a single, continuous thread. If we step away from those well-trodden, dusty caravan routes and journey eastward, deep into the lush, emerald expanse of the Brahmaputra Valley in northeast India, we find a radically different story. Here, in the dense, rain-soaked forests of Assam and the mist-shrouded hills of Meghalaya, a completely divergent technological and social paradigm took root. This was not a world of rigid state factories or alienated labor. This was a world engineered by matriarchs. In this chapter, we will explore the wild silks of northeast India, the shimmering, golden muga, and the peaceful, spun eri. We will uncover how the indigenous women of this region engineered a highly complex, decentralized system of textile production that defied the centralized control seen elsewhere in the ancient world. More profoundly, we will see how the loom itself became an instrument of ultimate female sovereignty, a tool for asserting political autonomy, securing land ownership, and weaving the very identity of a people into the fabric of the natural world. The golden and the peaceful, an ecology of the wild. To understand the triumph of Assamese sericulture, we must first look to the forest, and to the unique biology of the creatures that inhabit it. The silkworms of this region do not belong to the highly domesticated species of the Chinese mulberry moth. Instead, they are members of the Saturniidae family, a diverse lineage of wild and semi-domesticated giant moths, royal moths, and emperor moths. These insects are creatures of the open air, and their biology demands an entirely different relationship with human engineers. The crown jewel of Assam is muga silk. It is the exclusive product of a semi-domesticated moth known to science as Anther assamensis. Muga silk is renowned for a physical property that seems almost magical. It possesses a brilliant, natural, yellowish-golden hue. Ancient texts, such as the 3rd century BCE treatise the Arthashastra, marveled at this fiber, describing it as having the color of butter and being as red as the sun. But this color is not a dye. It is an inherent physical trait, born of pigments and complex structural coloration that actually grows more lustrous and vibrant with every single wash. The ecology of the muga silkworm is deeply tied to the specific biodiversity of the Brahmaputra Valley, and historical attempts to rear it anywhere else on Earth have consistently failed. The larvae feed exclusively on the aromatic foliage of the som and solu trees. Unlike the Chinese mulberry silkworm, which has been bred to docilely accept life in stacked, indoor wooden trays, the muga silkworm thrives in the wild outdoors. This presents a staggering logistical challenge for the rearers. The women and farmers of Assam must manage a rigorous, year-round crop calendar, braving the extreme climatic fluctuations of the region. Rearing muga is an act of supreme ecological stewardship. To protect the vulnerable larvae in the open forest canopy, rearers wrap the trunks of the som trees with oil-coated sheets to prevent predators from climbing up, and to stop the silkworms from crawling down. They drape delicate nylon nets over the branches, perfectly balancing aerodynamic ventilation with protection against birds, parasitic wasps, and the dreaded oozy fly. They must carefully monitor the carrying capacity of each individual tree, knowing exactly when to transfer the caterpillars to fresh foliage without causing them stress. It is a demanding, multi-generational partnership between human and insect, culminating in a fiber that is a marvel of biomaterials. Muga silk is the strongest of all natural silks, boasting exceptional tensile strength, and it provides incredible protection against the elements, naturally absorbing over 85% of harmful ultraviolet radiation. If Muga is the silk of brilliant resilience, then Eri is the silk of profound compassion. Eri silk, deeply woven into the heritage of both Assam and the neighboring hills of Meghalaya, is derived from the Samia racini moth. These caterpillars feed on the broad, star-shaped leaves of the castor plant, known locally as the Ara plant, which gives the silk its name. Eri is globally revered as peace silk or ahimsa silk, and the reason lies in the unique architecture of its cocoon. In conventional global sericulture, the mulberry cocoon must be harvested and boiled while the pupa is still alive inside. This is done to kill the insect so that it does not break the single, continuous filament of silk when it emerges. The Samia racini moth, however, engineers an open-ended cocoon. It completes its metamorphosis, transforms into a moth, and naturally crawls out into the world, leaving a jagged exit hole behind. The harvest of Eri silk is completely nonviolent. No life is harmed to produce the fabric. But this biological reality presents a profound mechanical problem. Because the moth breaks the thread upon its exit, Eri silk cannot be unwound in one long, continuous filament. It must be processed as a staple fiber. And solving that problem required an entirely different kind of technological ingenuity. A different kind of engineering, the triumph of the hand-spun thread. When we think of technological engineering, we often picture massive, centralized machinery. But the processing of Eri silk is a masterclass in localized, sustainable, and highly adaptable engineering. Because Eri is a discontinuous staple fiber, its structural dynamics align more closely with fine wool or heavy cotton than with traditional, slippery silk. It cannot be reeled, it must be painstakingly spun. The Assamese and Meghalayan women engineered a highly specialized, multi-stage process to transform these empty, broken cocoons into luxury yarn. First, the cocoons are degummed. Instead of relying on imported industrial chemicals, the artisans traditionally formulated their own bioalkaline solutions, boiling the cocoons in water mixed with the mineral-rich ash of banana leaves, wheat stalks, paddy straw, or even green papaya. Once the tough saracen gum is dissolved, the softened cocoons are stretched by hand in plain water, opened up into thin sheets, and layered together to dry into dense cocoon cakes. From these cakes, the spinning begins. To draft and twist the short fibers into a strong, cohesive yarn, the women utilize the tackly, a beautifully simple, highly portable drop spindle consisting of a central shaft and a weighted, disc-like base. A spinner holds the cocoon cake in her left hand, gently drawing out the fibers, while her right hand continuously flicks and rotates the spindle to impart twist. This is where the true genius of decentralized technology reveals itself. The tackly is small. It requires no fixed architecture, no state-funded factory, and no massive capital investment. It is entirely mobile. Women could spin while walking through the village, while tending to their children, or while gathering together in community spaces. This mobility integrated the technology of silk production seamlessly into the daily rhythm of rural life. The spinning of Eri silk was never an alienated, mindless chore. It was deeply meditative. The slow, rhythmic drafting of the fiber required intense concentration, transforming physical labor into a state of mindfulness, a quiet space where thoughts were spun alongside the yarn. The textile produced by this spinning process is a marvel. Because the staple fibers are twisted together, Eri spun silk possesses a uniquely porous structure and an isothermal nature. It acts as a natural thermostat, trapping warmth against the body during the chilly, damp winters of the hills, yet remaining highly breathable and cooling during the suffocating humidity of the summer. It lacks the high sheen, slippery luster of imperial mulberry silk. Instead, it presents with a subtle matte finish and a rustic elegance that grows softer, stronger, and more beautiful with every single wash. The engineering of both Muga and Eri silk stood in profound opposition to the imperial Chinese model. In Han and Tang dynasty China, sericulture was a rigid state monopoly. The continuous reeling basin and the heavy, stationary loom were mechanisms of centralized economic control, and the women who operated them were subject to strict imperial quotas and taxation. In Assam, the open forest ecology of the Muga silkworm and the highly portable spinning technology of the Eri silkworm naturally resisted monopolistic centralization. The means of production were inherently dispersed across thousands of rural households. Because the technology could not be enclosed by the state, the wealth it generated remained in the hands of the women who operated it. This technological reality set the foundation for a profound sociological phenomenon: the rise of the matriarchal loom. The matriarchal loom, sovereignty and the woven estate. To fully grasp the power of Assamese sericulture, we must situate this technology within the region's broader sociological landscape. Northeast India is a cultural tapestry that includes several deeply entrenched matrilineal societies. Even within the patriarchal communities of the plains, the physical space of the loom operates as a highly protected, female-dominated sovereign territory. Let us look to the neighboring state of Meghalaya, a core region for the production of Eri silk, known locally as Rindia. Here, the Khasi, Garo, and Jaintia tribes operate under ancient, strict matrilineal descent systems. Among the Khasi, who represent one of the largest surviving matrilineal cultures on the planet, lineage, clan affiliation, and inheritance are traced entirely through the mother. Ancestral land and property are not passed down to sons, they are inherited by the youngest daughter, known as the Kakata. She is the custodian of the household's wealth, the caretaker of her aging parents, and the spiritual head of the family. Men traditionally move into the homes of their mothers-in-law upon marriage. Within this matrilineal epistemology, women are not merely agricultural laborers or factory hands, they are the absolute owners of the land and the primary decision-makers regarding resource management. The production of Eri silk integrates perfectly into this socioeconomic structure. Women control the entire value chain. They cultivate the castor plants. They rear the silkworms. They extract the natural dyes from indigo and madder root. They spin the yarn on the takli, and they weave the final textile. The loom acts as a physical manifestation of their sovereign property rights. Because they own the means of production, the wealth generated from the silk remains firmly within female hands, reinforcing their political, economic, and social capital. Even moving down from the hills into the more patriarchal mainstream societies of the Brahmaputra Valley, the loom retained its status as an instrument of female power. Throughout Assamese history, proficiency in spinning and hand-weaving was considered a non-negotiable prerequisite for women, crossing all boundaries of class and caste. A girl was traditionally considered unready for marriage if she could not master the complex mathematics of the loom. As Mahatma Gandhi famously observed during his visit to the region in 1921, Assamese women weave dreams on their looms, a poetic acknowledgement of the profound agency intertwined with the craft. This female sovereignty was not a marginal, rural phenomenon. It was institutionalized at the very highest levels of the state. During the 600-year reign of the Assam dynasty, the royal courts were not exclusively the domain of men. Assam queens actively patronized, directed, and elevated the state's textile industry. Queens such as Sarbaswari, Fulaswari, and Ambika established elite weaving schools within the palace itself, personally taking charge of teaching the art of spinning and weaving to noblewomen. Expert female weavers from across the kingdom were recruited to operate the Rajakarya, the royal looms, and the compensation for this highly specialized, technical labor was staggering. In return for their services, these female weavers were granted tracts of rent-free land, and they were formally exempted from the compulsory state labor that was exacted from all other classes of citizens. Let that sink in. In medieval Assam, a woman's mastery of the loom was a direct mechanism for acquiring land, achieving tax exemption, and securing upward social mobility. The intricate knowledge required to cultivate the wild silkworms and operate the loom was passed down through generations of mothers and daughters, creating a matrilineal knowledge system that successfully resisted both the aggressive pressures of colonial marginalization and the disruptions of modern industrial patriarchy. Weaving identity, the language of the cloth. If the loom was the instrument of female sovereignty, then the textile itself was the document upon which that sovereignty was inscribed. In cultures where written histories were often vulnerable to destruction, decay, or colonial erasure, the women of Assam engineered their cultural memory, their tribal affiliation, and their ecological knowledge directly into the warp and weft of the cloth. The intricate, hand-woven motifs that adorned their garments were never merely decorative. They functioned as a sophisticated, readable visual language. They were identity cards, denoting a person's lineage, martial status, and ancestral origin long before paper records existed. The manual technique of designing and inserting these patterns into the weave is known locally as Sankey. It is an act of extraordinary mathematical and spatial intelligence. The weavers translate their physical surroundings and historical mythos into vivid geometric and organic forms. When a weaver wished to denote courage, power, and the wealth of the Assam dynasty, she wove the king cop motif, a magnificent design featuring two lions facing each other, often executed in brilliant silver and gold thread. When she wished to pay homage to the rich ecology of the Brahmaputra Valley, she wove the Kaziranga style, heavily featuring the dominant figures of the rhinoceros and the deer. Every motif carried a specific cultural weight. The Junebiri design traced the arc of a crescent moon, modeled after traditional Assamese neckpieces. The Gach or Goes Buddha motif depicted a tree, often accompanied by two facing birds, serving as a universal symbol of life, fertility, and the natural landscape. The Pakila, or butterfly, was a complex, shifting pattern that demonstrated the sheer technical expertise of the weaver. The Japi motif represented the traditional conical hat, a nod to the region's agrarian roots and the noble women who once wore them. And the Kesh Baka motif, typically woven at the horizontal borders of the cloth, represented a woman's braid or hairline, a literal physical insertion of the female form into the architecture of the textile. Tribal distinctiveness was, and remains, fiercely maintained through these woven lexicons. The Missing tribe, renowned for their opulent weaves, utilizes highly complex indigenous designs called gayamic, distinguishing themselves through the breathtaking ability to weave 7 different colors simultaneously. The Rabha tribe relies on a specific visual cryptography of vibrant red, black, yellow, and white, utilizing motifs of stars, flowers, and spiders. The Thai Fake and Thai Kamyang tribes utilize specific checked and striped patterns that act as a historical map, tracing their ancient migration routes from Upper Myanmar into the Indian subcontinent. By wearing these garments, particularly the Mekela Chudar, the traditional two-piece Assamese dress, woven from the shimmering golden muga or the pristine white pat silk, the wearer became a walking repository of indigenous history. Because the women controlled the Sankey, the design process, they completely controlled the narrative of their tribe. The loom allowed them to continually assert their political and personal identity, ensuring that their cultural heritage was not relegated to the glass cases of static museums, but remained a living, breathing component of daily life. The sacred thread. The sociological power of the loom in Northeast India is amplified by its deep, reverent integration into the spiritual and ritual calendars of the region. Sericulture and weaving are not viewed strictly as commercial enterprises or tedious chores. They are profound acts of devotion, heavily imbued with religious significance. This spiritual reverence for the textile reaches its zenith during Bohag Bihu, also known as Rongali Bihu, the most vital and joyous festival in the Assamese calendar. Marking the arrival of the new year and the vibrant onset of spring, the festival is celebrated over 7 distinct days, each dedicated to honoring a different facet of agrarian and social life. There is a day dedicated to the cattle, a day dedicated to mankind, and a day dedicated to the plow. Crucially, the 4th day of the festival is explicitly designated as Tater Bihu, the Bihu of the loom. On Tater Bihu, the wooden loom and all of the associated weaving tools are meticulously cleaned, purified, and worshipped. This is a dedicated day of reverence that honors the craft, the textile, and the sapini, the weaver herself. The community recognizes a fundamental truth: the survival of their identity rests upon the wooden frame of the loom. During the broader Bohag Bihu celebrations, women present a remarkable textile known as the gamosa or bahuan to their elders, lovers, and family members. This white, hand-woven towel, bordered in striking red and adorned with intricate floral motifs, is the ultimate Assamese symbol of respect, love, and cultural pride. A specific, highly venerated variant, the Gasing Gamosa, is woven exclusively for spiritual worship, used to adorn the sacred texts in the community prayer rooms. Hand-woven silk and cotton are mandatory for these ceremonial offerings. Machine-made or synthetic fabrics are considered spiritually empty, completely lacking the vital energy imparted by human hands. The mechanical process of extracting wild silk is itself laced with a deep spiritual philosophy. As we have seen, the spinning of Eri silk on the Takli is frequently described by local artisans as a deeply meditative act. Because Eri is a peace silk, produced without taking the life of the moth, the fabric inherently embodies the spiritual principles of nonviolence, compassion, and harmony with the natural world. The spinner acts as an active, nurturing participant in the cycle of life, rather than an agent of its termination. This reverence extends to the rearing of the muga silkworm as well, where the som and solu trees are protected and cultivated with a profound respect for the delicate balance of the open forest ecosystem. In the contemporary context, the decentralized, female-led sericulture of Northeast India offers profound, actionable lessons in sustainable engineering and economic resilience. As the modern global textile industry grapples with the devastating ecological consequences of fast fashion, chemically intensive agriculture, and exploited labor, the Assamese model presents a radically sustainable alternative. The production of Eri and muga silks requires significantly less water and far fewer toxic chemical inputs than conventional global textiles. Furthermore, because muga silkworms are highly sensitive and cannot survive exposure to pesticides or severe industrial pollution, the very preservation of the muga industry necessitates the aggressive protection of pristine, organic forest environments. The survival of the golden thread is inextricably linked to the ecological health of the Brahmaputra Valley. Economically, the traditional loom continues to serve as a vital engine for female empowerment today. In major weaving centers like Jewelkuchi, often referred to as the Manchester of the East, highly organized, women-led cooperatives dominate the landscape. These cooperatives ensure quality control, facilitate global market access, and provide critical leadership and financial literacy opportunities for rural women, continuing a legacy of economic autonomy that stretches back to the Assam queens. The extraction and weaving of wild silk in Northeast India represent far more than a localized footnote in the broader history of global trade. The cultivation of the shimmering muga and the peaceful Eri required an intricate mastery of entomology, forestry, and mechanical engineering that diverged sharply and brilliantly from the centralized, patriarchal paradigms of imperial China. Because the ecology of the forest canopy and the biology of the open-ended cocoon demanded decentralized solutions, the technology of silk production remained firmly in the hands of the community. Within the matrilineal and egalitarian societies of the region, women seized this technological framework and transformed the loom into a space of absolute sovereignty. Through the rhythmic clatter of the shuttle, they secured their economic independence, asserted their rights to the land, and commanded political respect. By engineering their tribal affiliations, their historical memories, and their spiritual devotions directly into the complex motifs of the cloth, Assamese women ensured that their voices could not be silenced by passing empires, colonial interventions, or the relentless march of industrialization. The golden threads of muga and the peaceful, spun fibers of Eri stand today as enduring testaments to the power of decentralized technology, profound ecological synergy, and the unbreakable autonomy of the matriarch.